I'm happy to introduce our speaker today, a fellow whose name is Lucas Conley, and he's written a book called Obsessive Brand Disorder, or OBD. And I'm more pleased than I usually am because I used to work with Luke, actually. We worked at Fast Company magazine together in Boston and later in New York, and it's been a while since we've been in touch, and so this is really just about me getting together with him for lunch afterward. But we wanted to bring him in to talk through the ideas in the book, because one of the things that strikes us occasionally on the marketing team within ad sales is that a lot of people talk about branding, don't know really what it means, and branding can kind of get out of control. Everyone has a brand now. You yourself can be a brand. And Conley's book is interesting because he kind of digs a little more deeply into that topic to look at what it really means for society and for culture. Is it a concern? Is it not a concern? And so forth. He started his career at the Atlantic Monthly, where I worked with William Langewiesche on a series of articles post September 11th. He's a contributing writer still for Fast Company magazine, and he's also written for the Boston Globe and ESPN. This is his first book, so without further ado, please welcome Lucas Conley.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Heath. Heath and I worked together for probably about 4 or 5 years between Boston and New York. It's good to see you and good to be here, and good to talk to Google. One of the classic rules of presenting to corporations is the fire and brimstone rule about speaking. And some of you will recognize this if you've ever been to a Gary Hamel speech, or most kind of business speakers will come in and they'll spend maybe 89 minutes of a speech telling you what's wrong with you or the company or your industry, and then they'll spend 1 minute celebrating the solution. So they leave you kind of on this elated high as you walk out, thinking they've led you through the valley, and you're walking out with a sense of a solution and change going forward. But one of the things I've had to realize in presenting this book is that there are oftentimes companies that I've been presenting with or talking to that I admire, and Google is one of those. And I think that Google does a good job when it comes to brand and branding and what the brand means to employees and what the brand means to consumers as well. So without say leading you into the valley of death and trying to tell you what's wrong with you, I thought I'd share with you some cautionary tales. Some of these are in the book, and some of these are from my experience actually promoting the book, or even prior to researching the book that never made it to the book. So the book is about branding, and in the past 15, 20 years, corporations have become more and more aware of their brands and their identities, in part because of advertisers, in part because of the way the media is splintered, and in part because consumers are complicit with that. We like to feel like we know the brands that we buy and that we use. More now than ever. We like to believe we're buying products that are good for the environment, or products that contribute proceeds to good causes. So this relationship that used to be maybe conveyed through 3 television networks on an advertisement that reached 80% of Americans is now this very intricate relationship with niche products and our brands that we kind of relate to and connect to, and has become a massive industry. And there's a branding firm out there ready to sell you a personal branding campaign, or sell you a new branding campaign for your firm, be it a corporation like Google or a small 2-person carpenter firm in a small town. So everybody's thinking about branding now, and everybody's becoming more and more concerned with it. But what I noticed is it became such a concern that it was becoming a distraction. Executives were pouring more money into their advertising campaigns than they were into research and development, or into training their customer service reps, or even into assessing their supply chain. I mean, some of these basic core competencies. And so that's where the book began. And what I noticed too is that it continues today. It's something that we still see each and every day. I picked up the news a couple days ago and saw that TiVo is now going to start planting ads into the functionality of the device when you press pause or fast forward. So this is the very purpose of TiVo, the very idea of what TiVo is about, the brand, is to get rid of those ads, and now they're finding ways to kind of slip those back in. And that's one of the first points I want to talk to you about, which is brands that are trying to be something that they're not. I had an opportunity a couple years ago to do a story on the Crown Plaza Hotel. Some of you are probably familiar with that. It's Crown spelt with an E, kind of that little branding flourish right there. And they had this new program, and it was about sleeping. And what they said is, we're going to offer you the best night's rest you can get in any hotel in the world. And this, working at a fast company, we thought, okay, we have a lot of business travelers. Let's check this out and see what that's about. So I went on an exploratory mission to spend a night in the Crown Plaza sleep program. And what this involved is they had a special floor that they have set aside in every one of their hotels, that there was their sleep floor. They were going to guarantee there weren't going to be any kids running by your hotel room, that it was going to be only business travelers or single people, very, a quiet floor. You got in, and they had a little bag. It was aromatherapy. There were CDs that had been put together by actual sleepologists. I mean, actual doctors who had studied sleep enough to decide that these songs were appropriate for sleep. The colors in the room were geared to helping you fall asleep. This entire package, was backed up by this massive marketing campaign and advertising campaign that was all generated around, we are now sleep experts. And we thought, okay, we can look into this and check it out. And we the science was right, and the general campaign looked good. So I spent the night in the hotel. And I put on the disc and did the little lavender spray on the pillow and went through the whole, regimen. And at 6:45, 7:15, someone's knocking at my door. And I'm thinking, what the heck is going on? So I get up, it's the cleaning lady. And she had come by because she was cleaning out the rooms, didn't realize that I was there. I said, no, I'm still asleep, and went back to sleep. About 30 minutes later, a different cleaning lady knocks on the door, it's housekeeping. And this happened 3 times. And of course, the article I wrote was this, the irony of a brand promoting something that they've truly invested a lot of time and money into, but they can't back it up. You see this everywhere, and as consumers, we see this all around us in the world, and the products we use. Big promises, but actually they can't live up to the things they're telling us. Brand Week has done a study for more than a decade now, I think, on consumer expectations and consumer satisfaction. And if you look at the graph, I guess it looks kind of like a mouth. The expectations continue to go up, and satisfaction continues to go down. This is because brands are promising us these better and greater things in more places, on the internet, on television, on cable television, on our phones, and yet they're not living up to these expectations. In an age of authenticity, like we live right now, in an age of transparency, you can't present one face to the consumer and then another face to your employees, or one face in your advertisements and another face on location. The perfect example is GM. When you look at GM promoting that it's about innovation, promoting its cars that have better fuel mileage, but then you can turn around and see that their lobbyists are in Washington, trying to fight higher fuel standards. This is an age of transparency. You can't present a different face for your brand than the brand that faces your consumers. Don't try and force products down customers' throats. It sounds almost too obvious. It sounds too simple. And maybe even more relevant for Google, with the fact that you guys have so many products in development at any given time. When I started getting into this book, what I found was the feed the monster philosophy was a word that branders used a lot. I went down to Cincinnati, where Procter & Gamble is based, and I heard this term a few times. Oh, we're feeding the monster. We're feeding the monster. And I said, at one point, what does this mean? And the guy said, well, consider this. You have a product. Let's say it's Lay's potato chips. Let's say it's a search engine. Let's say it's T-shirt. And year in and year out, for a couple decades, you've been the best product in your field. You've been the leading brand. And Target and Walmart and all the big retailers put you on the top shelf. And then they have a couple other products that compete with you. And then you have the generics, the house labels. That's the good, better, best philosophy. The consumer comes in and says, I want the best, or I'm going to go with the medium product, or I'll get the discount product and save some cash. Well, recently, private label products in the past 10 years have started thinking about their brands, better packaging, better development, better technology. Now consumers are saying, okay, you know what, I'd rather maybe get, say, the generic potato chips because they actually taste pretty good at Target. Target's Archer Farms brand, for instance. So what does Pringles do? Well, Pringles now is being approached by a major big box retailer like Walmart, and they'll say, listen, you're not the best of good, better, best right now. We're actually beating you with our private label products. Some of these other brands are nipping at your heels. Why are you here? What's the reason for your product? And this doesn't just happen in potato chips. It happens in moisturizers. It happens in cars and ceiling fans. Every product, every industry has to deal with this phenomenon. So what do? Well, the good answer would be, let's go back, let's innovate, and let's find some reason that the consumer is going to pay attention to us again. Let's offer them something better. But unfortunately, because of the obsessive branding disorder that we live within right now, the answer is usually let's put on a new logo, let's put a new color, let's make a limited fragrance, maybe a new packaging, And this is feeding the monster. And this is what keeps so many branding firms in the black right now, is quarter to quarter. If you have to relaunch your moisturizer to keep it on the shelves of Walmart, you go to a branding firm. And maybe it's a redesigned bottle. Maybe they decide we're going to put soy in this next one. I mean, they're very, very simple, quick, easy changes, but they kind of create a consumer ADD. And also, they dissatisfy more consumers than I think they satisfy. In the past 5 years, my wife has gone through 4 different face washes. She'll find one she likes, kind of settle into it, and then it'll get relaunched with a different label or like glitter or fragrance in it, and she'll switch around and go to another. We've seen this with deodorants, ice creams. I mean, most of us have some product that we liked that doesn't exist anymore because they decided to relaunch it as a different style or different brand. And so I try and encourage the companies that I talk to kind of step away from that. Don't try and create new products solely for the need or desire to create new products. Stick with things that work and that your consumers know work. For example, if you look at how many products consumers face every year, I'll put this one down to you guys. Does anybody have any idea how many products the average American household uses in a given year? Want to take a guess? Brands or labels? Anybody? Ooh, that's good. You're almost dead on, actually. Yeah, it's about 180. The average American household uses about 180 products, brand labels a year. Now, do you know how many are launched every year, just in the food and beverage space? This one's a little harder, and you might overguess it, but it's 75,000. So 75,000 products are coming at you every year, and you use about 200 of them. You can imagine, we don't need more products. We need better products. And one of the ways that you see this being disguised oftentimes when new products are launched is something called perceived functionality. And I caution Google to kind of keep this in mind too, is when you look at a bottle of soap or a bottle of motor oil, they'll often shape that bottle to kind of have a metaphorical feel or look to kind of make you think, okay, this product works better because of its shape. Maybe it's subconscious. Maybe it's a liquor bottle and it looks stately. Or in the case of the motor oil bottle that I was talking to a branding expert about down in Cincinnati, it was shaped kind of like a gas nozzle at a gas station. And he said, this is perceived functionality. The consumer doesn't realize that they're paying more for the bottle, but that's what's actually going on. The product hasn't changed. The formula is still the same, but they were relaunching the motor oil in a new bottle that looked like a little flashier, a little more NASCAR, a little more automotive, and would get another 2 quarters of happy consumers out of that label before they had to think of something else to feed the monster with and kind of bring back consumers from being drawn away by other products. Don't try and be everything to everyone. I think too often right now, brands want to be lifestyle brands. They want to answer every question that a consumer could possibly have and more. They want to stretch that brand. And so if some of you have kind of seen some of these examples, you'll recognize them as NASCAR sells packaged meats and there's a series of romance novels under the NASCAR label. Crayola has soft drinks. The Vatican's coming out with credit and debit cards. And these are examples of brands that have a certain meaning to certain people, but now are trying to take up a greater and greater footprint in the lives of their consumers, trying to stretch their brands and kind of create brand tribes. That's a term a lot of professors are using right now as a kind of third place in the mind for consumers. If we don't find it in our church, if we don't find it in our community, maybe we find it in our brand. Maybe we make our friends through the NASCAR website or through the particular products, the Apple, for instance, website that has kind of a cult following, and that these become new social hearths in our communities. And don't try and be everywhere. I think this is something that a lot of brands don't realize can also be harmful. It's good to be out there. It's good to be in front of consumers, but at a certain point, it becomes actually a detriment. Consumers right now, not even talking about 75,000 products a year, just talking about advertising. If you look at the arc of advertising in the past generation, in 1971, there were 560 ads that the average consumer saw on a given day. So from your walk to work to working, reading newspapers, seeing the news in the evenings, about 500 to 600 ads. Today, that number is closer to 3,000 to 5,000. So in one generation, we've seen a tenfold growth in the amount of advertising we see. And the money spent is absurd. $300 billion a year, it's $10,000 a second is spent trying to reach consumers just in the U.S. So when you look at that, between 1960 and 2000, we didn't even spend in 40 years as much as we spent in the past decade, basically. So we are spending more money than ever before, exponential factor, trying to reach consumers, trying to be everywhere is actually counterproductive. You'll see ads on eggs, etched into with lasers, ads pressed into sand. People tattoo themselves with ads for companies, and conveyor belts, even textbooks, school buses. The desire for brands to kind of reach out and be in every community, be everywhere that their consumers are, ultimately drives us back. We tune these out. Our mental filters boost up, and we decide, I don't want to, listen to the advertising message, and it becomes harder to actually get your message heard in the first place. And so when you look at what Google has done, for instance, I encourage the company to kind of continue in that vein with letting the brand rise from the bottom, let the products speak for themselves, let the homepage, remain simple, let the mission remain clear to the consumer rather than kind of projecting it, stretching it, and fussing over it, obsessing over it to the point that you're actually being counterproductive. And I think in an age of transparency, like we live in now, in an age of authenticity, that is the way that brands survive, and that's the way that I think brands will continue to look up to Google. And I also like to open it up to questions from the crowd, because this is also something as executives, as employees, we have experiences with our brands, but as consumers, we also are able to kind of turn those experiences on their head and try and empathize from a consumer perspective. So if anybody has any questions they want to ask, either from either perspective, be it the consumer perspective or the employee's perspective, I'd be happy to discuss those. Yeah. Well, when I started this book, one of the examples that the business press was kind of praising as Procter & Gamble's icon of the new generation of innovation was the Crest spin brush. Remember when this came out? It was 2003, and it was battery-powered spin brush. And I thought at the time, this is the height of American innovation, and what we're praising, we're in trouble. And sometimes it's not about just the product. It's about finding a faster way or a cleaner way or a more efficient way of getting products to where they belong. The example I like to point to, if you're talking about just doing a better job, maybe better products rather than more products, is H&M. Here's some people call this disposable clothing. So there's kind of a debate here about the benefits of this company. But in terms of innovation, it's kicking butt. Gap puts out products maybe I think 4 times a year is their general, and they have a couple ways of doing this, but generally they plan their products out a year in advance. H&M in some cases designing these clothes on the boats that are coming to the U.S. I mean, the level of innovation they're putting into these products is far above and beyond what consumers are used to, and as a result, they've seen huge sales growth because people are excited. Here's a new style. 6 weeks after I got something here, and there's a whole new line of clothes. That kind of thinking, that kind of innovation in terms of not just the product, but in terms of the supply chain, innovation in terms of the material sourcing. I think people often overlook those in corporate America because they think of it as boring. That's dull. I want to redesign the logo, and we want to discuss the brand aura and have ideation meetings about what we truly mean to the consumer. When oftentimes they're overlooking some excellent ways to both save money, excite the consumer, and outflank competition. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. There was a book that came out right when I began called Brand Hijack. Have you ever heard of this? And it's a guy named Alex Wipperfurth. Some people may have heard of it. And the guy's philosophy was develop your company, develop your products, and at a certain point, just start listening to the consumers in the way they're, even if it's not really selling very well, but listen to the people who really like it, and then hijack whatever that message is and carry that to the masses. The idea being, if it was authentic for this small group, hopefully it'll resonate with a very large crowd. I don't know if that works very well. I think mainstream consumers have very short attention spans, and they want to make up their own mind. And I think one of the questions that people ask me in parallel to yours is don't we live in an era of less and less brand power today? Aren't the consumers making the decision about what a brand is now? And I think the answer is yes. But I think that at the same time, it's causing brands to become more desperate and to obsess more. Brands are using neuromarketing right now, brain scans, to try and decide what really grabs consumers. There are billboards that will scan your face as you walk by, and they're able to assess how long did you look at that ad, what's your ethnicity, what's your age, what's your gender, and can that inform better advertising for us in the future? So brands are using new technology and new psychology more and more to try and pinpoint what we want and what we like, because consumers are starting to get more control. Social media allows us to review books we read right away after, and share that message with the world, as opposed to simply trusting the New York Times to tell us what a good book is. I see it as an increasing trend. I think that the battle between marketers and consumers will always exist. And I feel that when it comes to technology and psychology, consumers are actually losing ground. I mean, I feel like we have great advances with Amazon, with some of these ways to share opinions and share ideas about products. But when it comes to what brands are actually able to do in terms of research, in terms of kind of isolating a part of the brain or a part of a millisecond of a commercial that really hit home with the consumer, I feel like that needs closer investigation. I feel like as brands get better at that, we'll begin to wonder where's the line, and do we need to draw a line? Because I don't think marketers draw that line for themselves. I don't think they're bad. I think that they just push the envelope because that's what you do in your field. You get better at it, and you try and build revenues. Yeah. No, and I would think that they should. I would think that listening to the consumer more and allowing that to be a fluid, dynamic conversation is.
What's the traction there for marketers? What can we really do?
For brands, you mean?
Yeah, to help them sort of look at all the possibilities, look at everything that exists right now in the palette, rather than just sort of going, okay, let's rebrand or let's relaunch or let's do this.
Right. No, and I think this is about relevancy, right? It's about relevancy in an attention economy. If there are 15 competitors in a certain industry, and you're trying to be something different, say, than the leading brand, how do you capture what consumers are saying about you, or find out what consumers are saying about you, and then kind of embrace that? I think that what happens a lot of times with this, though, is either consumers will grab onto something, or brands will grab onto something consumers are saying, and almost kind of reform the company identity around that. You see this with brands that are kind of coming into social media. They'll start to act hip, and it's kind of like your grandfather trying to be hip and cool, and it doesn't often fly. And I think as a result, oftentimes brands that try to listen to consumers change too much, or kind of change their face too much, or kind of try and promote themselves in that way, and it's usually it clashes with what they were prior to that. So there are pratfalls along the way to actually just in that conversation with consumers. But some people do it right. I'm not saying that everybody does it wrong, but I'm saying that I think you see more cases of people doing it wrong than embracing it authentically, embracing what consumers want and representing that clearly.
So they need to stay away from the contrived authenticity piece and try and.
Right, because often, even if you're doing exactly what the consumer likes the most, even if you're promoting, our bank, we really focus on mortgages. Well, you did that well before you were talking about it. Now you're talking about it. It's kind of like me stepping up here and saying, I'm really cool. Well, the minute I said that, no one's going to think I'm cool. You get to make that decision. So I think a lot of times you'll drive by a billboard, and right now it's very popular with billboards to put a face of a consumer in a quote. I really like this bank because of this. And I feel like too often that it's invisible, because people don't want to, even if it is a real consumer in an advertisement or in a branding campaign, people want to make up their own minds. And it's kind of like saying you're cool versus just being cool. I think Google has done that well when it comes to why people like the products. Google isn't going out there to promote, here's why our products are popular. They let people spread that word themselves, and it kind of we like to hear that message from each other as opposed to from the brand itself. Any other questions about branding, obsessive branding disorder? Well, thank you guys for coming out. I really appreciate it.